There are a lot of us, you know. James Earl Jones, Bruce Willis, Emily Blunt. I think I spent, what was that, my fourth grade year, I got laughed at in class one day because I was, so I didn't talk for a year. So the teachers were sympathetic, and they knew I could read, so they didn't have to ask me to read out loud. You know, when they were trying to get people to read passages out loud to see if they could actually read or whatever, and I passed all the spelling tests. So I didn't really need to do a lot of talking. The more confident I got in my intelligence and my persona, the more able I was to deal with how I wanted to express myself and not use specific consonants or things that caught me. Because I would know early in the day if I was having a C day and it was so I didn't use those words. Or if I'm having a B day, the worst days are W days, because I still have things, sentences that start with what, why, when. It's like, because it's hard to fix that, to find that alternative word that you can start a sentence with. Motherfucker was my, you know, Elmer Fudd word, you know. And he's like, motherfucker. Okay, I can get it out now. Yeah, yes, it was. And there are several movies that I can look at and go, in Jungle Fever, when I was trying to ask Spike what he did for a living in the park, it was, and it worked for Gator, because he's just kind of caught up in whatever, but I could not get, what is it you do again? And he just kept it in the movie, which is fine. I realized that we were doing a Bond spoof, and all Bond villains have something. You know, Goldfinger had something, and Yaphet Kotto had whatever he had. And because I stuttered when I was a kid, I know people have this thing about people's speech patterns, and they think less of you when you have something, you know? And I don't want to stutter, but I know that a lisp is one of those things that people look at and they kind of go, you know, they snigger at you when you have them. The close just happened. So all of a sudden, everybody thought I was doing a Russell Simmons impression. But, you know, I just chose that Valentine would do that. And the director wasn't sure about that for a minute. You know, the first time I showed up during rehearsal and I did it, he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm working on a character thing. And he was like, you want to do that the whole movie? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why? It's like, why not? It's a Bond movie. And he's like, oh, well, let me listen to it. You know, I don't know. And I'm like, look, one of the baddest people on the planet had a lisp. And he's like, who are you talking about? I was like, Mike Tyson. And he was like, oh, really? And over the course of a day and a half, he got used to it and he loved it. And for me, it's, you know, it's easy to just step into a movie like that and just be me and do something kind of quirky. And but having that lisp gave me focus. You know, it was something for me to focus on every day when I'm there. I have to make sure I pick the right words to, you know, lisp on, to make fewer, all the S's, some of the T's, some of the W's, you know, all those things that work in a lisp. And you have to focus on that. And until it becomes something that I didn't have to think about, I just knew which word that was going to be and how that worked. And it got to be, you know, natural and easy. And he's a megalomaniac. He got more money than God, you know, but he also knows that people tend to misjudge him because of the way he speaks. And he uses that to his advantage, you know? And it was fun for me to do that.
Yo, man, you know me. Money's not my issue.
I could have retired straight out of MIT, fucked off to some island, let the business run itself. Nobody told me to try and save the planet. I wanted to. Climate change research, lobbying, years of study, billions of dollars, and you know why I quit? Because the last time I checked, the planet was still fucked. Hence, my epiphany. Money won't solve this. Those idiots who call themselves politicians have buried their heads in the sand and stood for nothing but re-election. So I spent the last 2 years trying to find a real solution. And I found it. There was no trepidation about going back to the stage because that's my genesis. That's where I flourish in my mind, and I love the idea of it. So when I got there, or before the first day of rehearsal, when I was sitting at home figuring out how I was going to make this thing work and how I was going to do it, I knew that I was not going to be on stage doing an imitation of Martin Luther King, doing the, I have a dream. I couldn't do that because I know that people don't talk like that. And having been around those guys, all my life, and especially the powers that be at Morehouse that were his contemporaries, and having seen him, just orating or debating with other people, I knew that that was not his normal speaking voice. That was his orator's voice. So finding who that Southern preacher is and who that educated Southern preacher is, not some jackleg Southern preacher, but a Morehouse man from that particular era, I know that they have speech patterns that are indicative to our ears because we hear them, because we're being taught by these people, or we encounter them a lot more than most people, and there is a rhythmic and elongated pronunciation thing that they do. Sometimes they mispronounce words because they're doing things to them, so that when you say a word like there, it's not clipped, it becomes there. There are certain ways that I'm going to speak that will make you think that I'm very important. And it's like, that middle of drawing out of those words. And I'd heard enough of them that when I heard it in my head, it sounded right. And it served me well because I didn't necessarily have to do that imitation that people wanted. But when audiences sat there and listened to it, they immediately recognized, oh, that's that guy who was educated in this particular time, in this particular place, that allows him to feel important. Now, there's another strange thing, too, that I do that I don't know that other actors do. Most times, I don't hear my lines out loud until I rehearse them for the first time on camera. I don't sit at home and do my lines out loud. I do them in my head. I don't know. I just don't want, first of all, I don't want to disturb my wife, or I don't want her asking me, you want me to run lines with you? No, I don't. And I've always done that. I mean, I can learn them maybe by the third time I read them, I know them. So I got that capability. So after I've done that, then I started running through all the iterations of how they sound, of what it is. Where the emphasis here, where's the emphasis there? Is this loud? Is this soft? Is this endearing? Is this angry? Is it fast? Is it slow? I can run them all through my head and choose the one that I think works in that situation and move on to the next thing to see if it fits with that. Or do I need to go back, change the way this works, the inflection's here so that it leads into this. But it all just happens in here. And when I go on set for the first time and they say, let's rehearse, that's the first time I hear them out loud. The tone, the ambiance, the volume, all those things change when you're in a real situation. Um, there are things that inform it that I haven't done, like when there are props there. If I'm picking up a prop that's there, I haven't done that in my head because I didn't know what the room looked like. The unique value of being in a Tarantino film is we rehearsed for 3 weeks to a month. By the time we did Pulp Fiction, we were in a studio for rehearsal for a month. The whole killing room was taped out. The hallway in the apartment building was taped out. I knew how many steps there were from the elevator to the door, to the hallway, where John and I had the conversation, back to the door. We knew how many steps there were from the car to the front door to the elevator. We'd rehearsed everything. Same thing with Hateful Eight. We sat around that table in a studio. They recreated minis in a studio with props. So we got to practice with the props and everything else. So we knew how much stew we were eating. We knew everything until we got there and we started shooting, and we ate stew for like a week. It was horrid. We ate stew for a week, and Quentin was like, "I don't want none of that goddamn movie eating either. I want you eating." So we were sick of stew. But sometimes you don't know the props, but you get there and you start doing the lines and you pick something up that you hadn't picked up in your mind while you were rehearsing the lines. You pick something up and you either look at it while you're doing the lines, and you look at the person and you handle that thing, you put it down, or you take a drink that wasn't there, in your mind when you were rehearsing the lines. So there are things that change, but your plan vocally and intentionally remains the same. I tend to do vocal warm-ups more when I'm in a theatrical setting, or I did them more when I was doing theater. I only do them now just perfunctorily before I do voiceover things. I mean, there are times when I'm going into an ADR session, or before I'm going to do any kind of voiceover, I do go through consonants and vowels, A-E-I-O-U, 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 or I will run through the alphabet sometimes with a do-de-do-de-do-de-do-de, A-E-A-E-A-E-A-E-I-O, bo-be-bo-be-bo-be-bo-be, bo-baby-bye-bo-boo. And I do every alphabet and go through it, and then go from the highest point in my voice to the lowest, like, So I'm letting my voice know that we're about to do some work, So I limber up. Yeah, I do some stretches. Voiceover acting is just an exercise in reading aloud. A lot of times alone. Occasionally there are other actors there. But I think that one of the things that served me very well in a venue like that is the fact that I did spend long evenings sitting on the porch with my grandfather listening to radio drama and how people use their voices to tell stories, like Andy Griffith, and listening to Amos and Andy and Sergeant Preston of the Yukon and The Shadow and things like that. So I understand dramatic reading and the use of your voice in terms of the ups and downs of excitement or the calm of exposition, and being able to interpret what's going on. I mean, I've also had the privilege of actually doing an audio book, which is kind of fun because I have to change my voice and do a bunch of different characters in the story and find distinctive sounds for each one. So it's a matter of being able to read and interpret, and I think I've accomplished that. I mean, like I said, I read a lot anyway, so when I read in other people's voices in my head after I've chosen the character that I am in that story and how I sound in that story. you hear different voices of people as you read. I guess the most difficult aspect of that was from time to time, having to bounce from one character to another, or there were incidental characters that passed through every now and then, and remembering what that voice was when that character bounced into the dialogue or the story at that point, and being able to do it. It's kind of fun and challenging when you have group scenes in a book and there are multiple characters talking to each other and differentiating those voices when you have an opportunity to do it, and remembering who sounds like what and who's speaking, and distinctly making those voices different so that people will know that character speaking, that character speaking, that character speaking, that character speaking. When I was approached to do I Am Not Your Negro, I'm a huge fan of James Baldwin. I knew or instinctively felt that I didn't want to try and imitate James Baldwin. One of the things that I'm pretty certain I can't do is imitations. I envy people that can mimic other people's voices. I can't do that. I watch Jamie do it, and I watch a lot of other people do it, and they do it well. And in talking to Raul about what was on the page and how he wanted it interpreted, he asked me to give him a quiet dignity of sorts, to use those words in the way that I would use those words, not necessarily in the way that Baldwin would say them, in terms of what his speech patterns were or what that would mean to an audience listening or people who knew his voice, but to give something that was universal but impactful in terms of allowing people to absorb the images that were on screen and still absorb the intellectual quality of what James Baldwin wrote. And we found this kind of quiet, intense voice that I hoped would be soft enough that it would make people sit forward to listen, but making sure that the intonations and the inflections were clear enough that they would be universally understood. I watched a lot of cartoons when I was a kid, and I didn't think the voices weren't real. I just thought they were the voice of that particular animal or cartoon character. And it's like, Daffy Duck's voice is Daffy Duck's voice. Elmer Fudd's voice was Elmer Fudd's voice. So when I read it, I hear a voice and I think of the audience that it's for. And I mean, it's kind of like baby talk. When people talk to babies, they go, oh, baby, because they think babies like that. I never talked to my daughter that way because I was like, she needs to hear what people sound like. When people talk baby talk to her, I always talk to her like I talk, which is fine. But when it's a youthful audience, there's something about voices with higher timbres that they like. But the reality of my higher timbre voice is still a real voice of a human being and not something that's kind of not something they're going to hear, because kids aren't going to go through life hearing people talk to them. Oh, you're so cute. Talk to them like that. So I talk like a normal person, but I will change the timbre, and the energy of my voice changes because that's the energy of a child, and children like things that engage them, and you want them to be engaged. So when I'm doing movies that are specifically designed for a youthful audience, I try and use a voice that has energy and is something significant that they can attach to or be excited by.